Hi guys, this is the video for month 9 for the Cotton Cuts Puzzle Mystery Quilt Are You game. So this is the last month where we're putting together some clues here, and then next month we put everything together and it's finally revealed. The mystery comes out. What does this quilt look like all put together? So I'm super excited to get through this month and get these pieces together because we are so close to the finish line. So close, and it's been so fun. So we have 2 clues that we're making today. So they're going to be identical squares. So everything that we're doing, we're just going to basically be making double. So for example, on step 1, they want us to make 4 squares. I'm just going to go ahead and make 8 because we're going to end up making 2 identical sets of these clues. So let's go ahead and get our pieces all counted and make sure everything is here. So for this month, you should have 8 D rectangle pieces, 8 F rectangle pieces, 2 D squares, 8 E triangles, and 8 C triangles. So I went ahead and already counted all of my pieces and everything is accounted for. So we're just gonna dive right in and get started on step number 1. So this is just going to be combining the C and E triangles. So let's go ahead and just set the other pieces to the side for now and get out our triangles. So I know step number 1 says to make 4, but this is just to make 1 block, but we are in the end going to have 2 identical blocks. So we're just gonna go ahead and actually put together 8. If you want to just put together 1 block first, and then you'll go back and just do it all again, that's completely up to you. I'm just gonna go ahead and do all of my pieces together. I just feel like it goes a little bit quicker. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew together 8 of these squares. So we're going to take a C triangle and an E triangle, and we're going to go ahead and put those right sides together and do our 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then create 8 of these little cute squares. So go ahead and get started on that, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, now that I have all 8 of my little triangles sewn together, we're going to go ahead and we're going to press our seam allowances towards the C fabric. So then we'll have these little squares. They should come out to be 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of mine ironed, pressing towards the C fabric. So that would mean when you have it on your mat, you're pressing towards the C fabric, just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get all those ironed, and then we'll set these aside for now and move on to step 2. All right, so the next pieces we're going to be working with is going to be D and F rectangles. So if you're working with Team Cranium, your D fabric will be your dark blue little floral here, and your F fabric will be, looks like tree bark, and it's pink. So we're going to go ahead and make 8 of these as well, and we're going to put the D fabric on top, F fabric on the bottom, and just put those right sides together, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we'll just go ahead and do that 8 times. When we're all finished with that, we're going to be pressing towards the D fabric, and I'll show you what that looks like after I have all of these sewn. So I'll be right back. All right, now that I have all of my rectangles sewn together, I'm going to start pressing them open now. So we're going to be pressing towards the D fabric, which means that your seam allowance should lay behind your D fabric in the back. And then this piece should measure to be 3.5 by 5 inches. So that looks perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of these ironed, and then we will be moving on to step 3. All right, so now that I have all of my rectangles ironed, I'm going to set those to the side. Step 3, we're basically going to be joining the rectangle that we just made to 2 squares that we made in step 1. So what we're going to do is grab one of your rectangles and set it down with the D fabric on top, the F fabric on the bottom. Go ahead and grab 2 of your squares, and we're going to put one on each side, but we're going to make sure that the E fabric is what's touching each side of the rectangle. So C fabric should be in the upper left hand corner and upper right hand corner, and then the E fabric should be what's touching our rectangle here in the middle. So this is what we're basically going to have for step 3. So what we'll do is we'll work on one side first. Let's go ahead and have those right sides together, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then when we're done, we're going to be pressing towards the rectangles, and I'll show you how that looks when I'm done as well. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the one side, we'll get it pressed, and then I'll come back and we'll do the other side of the rectangle. All right, so now that I have sewn them together, it should look like this. And the back has the seam allowance pressed towards the step 2, which is the D and F fabric. So we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing except to the other side. Right sides together, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and just make sure that when you are stitching these together that these already flattened seams are staying flat. Just keep an eye on those, they don't get like accidentally stitched the wrong way during this process. And then we are going to just do that 4 more times. So let me go ahead and get this finished. I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so a completed rectangle should look like this now. We have the E fabrics touching the middle rectangles here with our C triangles in the upper corners. And we're just gonna repeat that a total of 4 times. So we have 3 more to make. So we'll put this to the side and we're just gonna do the same thing 3 more times, total of 4. So we have the D fabric on the top, and then we have the E fabric touching each side. Go ahead and just get them laid out so that you can kind of see them and know what you're working with here. All right, so we should have 3 more to make. So let's go ahead and get those sewn and pressed, and then we'll be moving on to step 4. And one more thing to add, if you are having your finished pieces together, they should be measuring at 11 by 3.5 inches. So just make sure you're paying attention to that each time that you make one. So this one came out perfect. I will be honest, this one came out a little bit short. So I'm gonna go ahead and just probably seam rip that top part right here because I can see where my stitch was a little bit off. I went a little bit wonky there. See, we're not all perfect. So just pay attention to that while you're doing it. I'm gonna go ahead and unstitch that and restitch it, and then I should be perfect at 11 inches. So we just wanna make sure that we're just accurate with our measurements here. All right, back to sewing. All right, so now that we have 4 of these beautiful little rectangles, make sure your seam allowances are both pressed towards the D fabric and the F fabric in the middle. And then go ahead and put these to the side. We're gonna be working with our last pieces here. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these left, which are our rectangles that we made in step 2. So go ahead and grab your 2 large squares, and we're going to be making 2 identical pieces here. So we're going to have the D fabric on the left side and on the right side. So we should have our F fabrics touching our D square, just like this. A gorgeous pattern. That's so pretty together. So we should have 2 pieces when we're done to look like this. So go ahead and have them right sides together. We're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When we're done stitching these pieces together, make sure that we're pressing towards the rectangles, and I'll show you what that looks like afterwards. And then this piece should measure at 11 by 5 inches when we're done. So we'll double check our measurements and make sure that's all correct. And then we'll move on to the last step, and that's combining them together to create what's going to be an absolute beautiful square. So let's go ahead and get those stitched. So when your piece is all sewn together, it looks like this, and your seam allowances are pressed towards your step 2 rectangles that we created. So they're pressed against the back of that F fabric right here. So just make sure that they're pressed the right direction and that they measure at the 11 by 5 inches that they should be. Absolutely perfect. And then I'm gonna go ahead and get this one stitched together, and we'll move on to step 5, our last step. All right, for our last step, we're gonna take 2 of these rectangles that we just made in step 3, and we're just gonna put one on the top and one on the bottom, and you're gonna see this block come together so beautifully. What you should have is your F rectangles should all meet at a point like this. You should have the C fabric all on the outer corners, and you should have a block that looks just like this. If you're Team Cranium or whatever team you are, it should have this design and this pattern to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put them right sides together and at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When stitching, just take your time, be very careful with nothing getting folded over here as we're stitching. We want everything to lay nice and flat. So when we're done with all of this together, when we press our seam allowances, we're going to be pressing them towards these rectangles, these outer rectangles, which are step 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the top. I'm going to iron that flat and show you what that looks like, and then we'll complete our little adorable square here. All right, so my top half is sewn on, and I went ahead and pressed my seam allowance here towards the rectangle that we attached. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing to the other side, making sure that my C triangles are sewn the right way. Make sure when you're laying these together, you're not doing something like this, because then you're gonna need to seam rip and fix it, unless that's your style. But I think that you'll be a little disappointed to not get the full effect of the quilt when it's all put together. So go ahead and make sure that your placement is correct. Right sides together, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we'll get that pressed. And then we'll just finish that with the last pieces that we have left, and then we are done with month 9. So let me go ahead and get this sewn. All right, so I have one of the squares completed, and it should be an 11-inch square, and it is so gorgeous. Oh my gosh, I think this is definitely my favorite month so far. I have a feeling this is going to be a very big staple piece in this little mystery when our quilt is all put together. So I'm really excited to see it all together and this incorporated. It just looks so beautiful. All of the fabrics together. I'm obsessed with Team Cranium, absolutely obsessed. So I'm going to go ahead and take my pieces I have left, and I'm going to do the same exact thing I just did, and we will be all done with month 9. So we should have them look like this. Get them all connected, and then we should have 2 11-inch squares, and then we can put these away and label them, put them away safely, and before we know it, we're going to be on month 10, and we're going to be putting a quilt top together, which is so exciting. So let me get this finished, and then I'll show you the finished 2 squares, and then we'll sign off and wait for month 10. And there it is, guys, 2 beautiful clues. I am obsessed with month 9. I feel like this is the month that kind of really showed us, like, this is what our fabrics look like together on the team that we chose, and they are going to be absolutely amazing, blown up with all of our clues combined together. So I'm so excited. I love how this month came together. If you guys have any questions at all, just leave them in the comments. Let me know what team you're on and how is it going. I feel like these 9 months just flew by. So I'm so excited for month 10. And until then, I will see you guys for our last step for Puzzle Mystery Quilt Are You Game? Have a good one, guys.